What's going on, everyone? So I wanted to make a video kind of reviewing the Swift Spec R springs from Black Ops Auto Works. Those are the $500 ones that drop 1.5 inches all the way around, and they work with the load leveling rear shocks, which is what my 16 RT has. So far I've got close to 1,000 miles on them. I like them. I haven't noticed any difference in the ride quality. They're supposed to be stiffer, a pretty stiff spring rate, so if you're looking to, I guess, do a little more than just drive your Durango, like I was kind of planning on doing some autocross events, then these will work pretty good since they've got a stiffer spring rate. Unfortunately with the Durango, there's like at least for like the 16 and up, there's no aftermarket strut option that's like a performance strut, at least for the front, because it's got that mount for the sway bar. So anyways, I like them so far. Like I said, I haven't noticed any difference in ride quality. Ride quality has been good still. My one complaint so far is the back is a little bit loud and I'm purposely on a kind of shitty road just so that you can maybe hear it. But anytime you hit a bump, you can hear it thud in the back, almost like I guess because the spring is so much stiffer, and because it's dropped so much, maybe the shock has more. The shock has to work a little more. I'm not sure. It's bottomed out more. But anytime you hit a bump, you can really hear the thud back there, which I think is typical for a stiff spring that lowers your vehicle. I've had springs on my S2000, my Integra, so I'm used to that noise. Once you install them and you hit bumps, it's going to feel hard. It's going to sound like a hard noise. The front, though, was really quiet. I haven't noticed anything with the front. Any bumps I hit, it absorbs it nice. There's no noise, but the back does have a thud, and I'm not sure if that's just my Durango or if that's like a common issue, like amongst anyone who installs these Swift Spec R springs. But the ride height is something I love the most about it. So whenever I dropped the rear, and I'll add video of that, but or maybe like a couple pictures of that, but the rear, like as soon as I set the car back on the ground after installing the rear springs, it was an immediate 1.5 inch drop. And depending on how the car's parked, it goes lower than an inch drop. And I don't know if this is supposed to happen, but whenever I park the car, after I get done driving it, it looks a little bit higher, and then if it sits for an hour or two, the wheel gap goes away, like the car almost drops. I don't know if that's from the load leveling shocks or not. I've never had suspension like that, like a load leveling type suspension, so I don't know if that's what it does. Is it just kind of drops almost like an air ride once the vehicle's not in motion. But I've noticed that whenever I stop and park the vehicle, it looks a little bit higher, like there's more wheel gap. But after the vehicle sits for an hour or two, that wheel gap goes away and it's like flush. But I would say it's more than an 1.5 inch drop when the vehicle's parked, at least on the rear for sure. The front's a pretty good drop too, and I'll pull over and park somewhere here shortly and kind of show you guys what it looks like. But I think I would lean more towards a 2 inch drop is what it looks like, which is still, I mean, the Durango's got so much space, so much wheel gap. It's at least 3 or 4 inches of wheel gap, so a 2 inch drop isn't gonna mess you up too much. And this is my work truck, and I usually have about 150 pounds of tools in the back, and I never have issue with any kind of rubbing or anything like that. I'm on stock 20s with the stock tire, like factory tire spec. Yeah, overall, I'd say they're pretty good investment. And now I know there's complaints about the price, that it is $500, but if you've got load leveling shocks and you get the iBox, the back isn't going to drop unless you get regular style shocks, and those are going to cost you $100 to $120 a piece for the rear. So you spend $300 on the iBox springs, you're gonna have to spend another 200, 240 on rear shocks. So there you're already in over $500. You might as well just get these Swift Spec Rs, because they are going to give you that instant drop, and you don't have to change out your struts or buy brackets, like different mounting brackets or anything like that, like you would have to do with the iBox to get the same drop. Let me find a spot to pull over here, and then we can kind of go over the outside, what the drop looks like, and how the Durango sits. All right, guys, so this is just right after driving, so you can see the front. That's about how low it usually stays. I would say, about 2 fingers of wheel gap. Go around to the other side here. But it looks pretty good, I think. It's a good drop. And it does settle a little bit after it sits. But so see how high the rear is right now. I want you to look at that and remember that, because I'm gonna film after the car sits for a little while. But let's just say 4 fingers. Once it sits for a little while, it's like I could barely get 2 fingers under there. So I think that has something to do with the load leveling shocks. But that's what it looks like fresh after driving. And then, like I said, I'll film again once I have let the car sit for a little while, so you can see how that looks. But I wanted to touch on performance aspect, like handling and stuff, because I forgot to mention anything about that. I haven't really noticed too much. I know it drops the center of gravity a little bit, but while you're driving, the rear is really just stock height because of those load leveling shocks. It really doesn't sit until the car sits for a while. It doesn't drop until the car sits for a while. But I mean, it feels a little bit tighter, I guess, around turns and stuff. I guess because of the lower center of gravity, but it wasn't like a huge mind-blowing difference. So if you're looking to get these just to improve handling, it's probably not going to really do much for you. There needs to be like some kind of aftermarket options for suspension for these, which there really isn't. I know B Woody has some stuff, but it doesn't have anything to do with like aftermarket sway bars or aftermarket shocks or struts that are adjustable, or anything like that. So hopefully the market kind of picks up on that and gives us some options for that. But yeah, so this is how it sits fresh after driving. You can actually see the rear on this driver's side's actually settled just a little bit since stopping. But I'm gonna go home, let it sit in the driveway for a little bit, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like after that. About 30.5 inches for the front, about 31 inches. So the back right now is a little more compressed than usual, just because this is on a really slight slope to the right, but the front's pretty typical. You can see, so not much wheel gap, maybe 2 fingers, but I think overall it's a pretty good ride height.